The development background of Solarpunk stands out right away as a project led by just two developers, Cyberwave and Mipumi Games, which immediately conveys the sense of a truly handcrafted work of pure passion. Playing the demo made me realize that, despite the lean team, they managed to assemble well-thought-out mechanics, such as automating harvesting and watering using solar and wind energy, something not commonly seen in survival titles made by such small teams. Another point that caught my attention was how they funded the game. The Kickstarter campaign not only hit its initial goal of $32,000, but surpassed it to over $48,000, showing that the community believes in the project's potential. This extra funding is already being planned to unlock the second goal of $74,000, which features additional decorative objects, a detail demonstrating that the developers are listening to backer feedback and thinking about expanding content as support grows. The development timeframe is also relevant. According to information shared by the creators themselves, the game has been in production for over 3 years, indicating greater care with polishing and building a world that actually conveys the cozy concept they aim for. This long-term dedication contrasts with many of the flash announcements we see today and suggests that the final release will not be a rushed product, but rather something that went through multiple iterations based on gameplay testing. Having the demo available during the Steam Next Fest from February to March 2025 was a good strategy to generate visibility and gather real player impressions. Even with the limitations imposed on the trial version, such as locking certain items and actions past a certain point, it became clear that the focus is on showcasing the core loop of building, exploration, and energy management without resorting to combat, maintaining the cozy atmosphere that differentiates the title from other survival games. I also noticed that the team has kept an open channel of communication, though it has failed at times. The Discord link that was supposed to provide updates stopped working, which can cause frustration among those who want to follow development closely. This minor stumble serves as a reminder that even with good intentions, managing expectations for an indie project requires a support infrastructure that is not always ready from the start, but transparency regarding what is working and what is not remains a positive point. Personally, I see in these aspects small team, community funding, prolonged development, and a focus on accessibility, a development context that conveys seriousness and a love for the craft, which makes me eager to see how the full game unfolds. The story of Solarpunk, at least from what I could see in the demo, takes a very different approach from most survival games. Instead of starting with a world in ruins, global disasters, or a post-apocalyptic hurricane, the game is set in a future where humanity has managed to build a society more balanced with nature. This simple shift in perspective makes all the difference in how I engage with the narrative, as it removes the constant feeling of survival out of desperation and places me into something more reflective and hopeful. In the demo, there is no heavy cutscene-driven narrative or long dialogues explaining the background. Instead, the story appears environmentally through the world itself. The floating islands, the architecture integrated into the vegetation, the solar and wind energy systems working naturally, all of this tells a silent story of a civilization that chose to adapt rather than destroy. For me, this is much more powerful than an explained narrative because I feel like I'm discovering the past and present of this world through my own observations. Another aspect that caught my attention in the story is the absence of traditional combat. In practically every survival game, violence is a central pillar, but here the narrative seems to revolve around cooperation, construction, and harmony with the environment. This gives me the impression that the real threat is neither a monster nor a human enemy, but rather the difficulty of maintaining this balance in a world that requires constant care. It's a mature approach that transforms survival into an act of responsibility, not domination. It's clear that the story is being built with a strong bias toward technological optimism, which is typical of the Solarpunk movement. Technology is portrayed as something cold and oppressive, but as a tool that can be used to create, cultivate, and regenerate carefully. It's as if the story is saying, you can survive without destroying. One point that made me think a lot is that even with this calmer atmosphere, there's a shadow of historical context that has not yet been fully revealed. Why are the cities floating? What happened before this new era? Who were the people who lived in these places before you? The demo doesn't answer these questions directly, and this, for me, is an intentional narrative choice. The game seems to want me to uncover the past gradually, by exploring, building, and feeling, rather than receiving ready-made information. This approach reminds me of games that use the environment as a narrator, but Solarpunk has its own identity because of the idea that the future doesn't need to be dark to be interesting. The story it tells is of a world that chose another path, and this brings a rare sense of hope to a genre that normally deals with despair and catastrophe. For a player who is already tired of seeing the same type of post-apocalyptic narrative, this is a very welcome breath of fresh air. Overall, the story is still under construction and is not fully revealed, but what has already been shown by the developer creates a solid narrative foundation that aligns with the game's premise. The story doesn't exist just to justify survival, it's part of the very essence of the experience, transforming every action of building, planting, and exploring into something that holds meaning beyond the mechanics. For me, this turns Solarpunk into something more than a survival game. It's a playable narrative about a possible future, and that is quite inspiring. The gameplay in the demo is one of the most refreshing I have found in survival games. Instead of the constant tension of hunger, danger, and combat, the game delivers a calmer loop. Exploring floating islands, gathering resources, building a base, and gradually automating processes using solar, wind, and water current energy. This approach removes the typical pressure of the genre and makes me feel more like I'm working on a creative project rather than fighting for survival. The energy mechanic is the heart of the gameplay, and in my opinion, it is well executed. The player needs to plan how to generate electricity depending on the weather, use batteries to store power, and utilize wireless transmission to keep the base running. This is not just a pretty interface, it is a system that actually makes me think about how to organize my base, where to place solar panels and wind turbines, and how to balance consumption. It adds a layer of strategy that provides depth without overcomplicating things. Farming and the relationship with animals also stand out. Instead of hunting, I cultivate fruits and vegetables as the main food source, and animals are cared for in symbiosis rather than exploited. Pigs, for instance, can dig up truffles if well treated, and sheep provide wool. This completely changes how I relate to the world. I don't need to kill to survive, I need to nurture. It's a mechanic that reinforces the game's cozy identity and makes farming more satisfying and less repetitive. Building is free and highly expressive. In the demo, you can feel that the game wants me to design my dream base, offering a wide selection of materials and decorations. There are no rigid grid restrictions or a mandatory style, allowing me to create truly personal environments, from a simple corner to a cozy house filled with details. This turns building into a central part of the experience, not just a means to survive. Automation is another strong point of the gameplay. With transport drones, I can automate resource collection and crop irrigation, which grants me more time to explore and build. This is very important for a survival title because it prevents the game from becoming a repetitive chore of gather, plant, gather, plant. Automation allows me to focus on what's most fun, creating, planning, and discovering new islands rather than getting stuck in an exhausting loop of basic survival. The airship is the element that truly makes exploration work. Each player can build their own airship to travel between islands, discover new resources, and access merchants with more varied items. This creates a very satisfying sense of freedom and progression because opening new maps is not just a matter of more area, but of new possibilities for building, automation, and farming. Exploration becomes a natural part of the loop, not an obligation. The cooperative mode is a major differentiator in the gameplay. I can play alone or with up to 3 friends, each with their own inventory, deciding whether to build together or create separate spaces on the same island. This makes the game much more flexible and social without losing its relaxing identity. In my opinion, this combination of peaceful gameplay, smart automation, free building, and meaningful exploration makes Solarpunk a survival game that truly stands out, especially for anyone tired of the constant pressure of the genre. The graphics feature a very distinct low-poly aesthetic that surprised me positively. Instead of chasing the excessive realism that many survival games attempt, the game opts for a more stylized and clean look with simplified shapes and vibrant colors. This artistic choice works very well for the cozy tone the developer wants to convey, creating a visual atmosphere that invites relaxation rather than constant tension. The color palette is one of the visual style's strongest points. The game uses shades of green, blue, and gold intensely, with plenty of sunlight flooding the floating islands. This chromatic choice reinforces the project's Solarpunk identity, showcasing a future where technology and nature coexist harmoniously. During the demo, I noticed how this warm lighting and saturated colors create a sense of visual optimism that is rare in survival games. The floating islands have distinct visuals, providing variety to the environment without losing aesthetic coherence. Mountains, lakes, and caves appear with different designs, each with its own visual identity, while maintaining the same general aesthetic style. This makes me feel like I'm exploring a diverse world, rather than just traversing repetitive variations of the same biome. Visual variety is important for an open-world game, and Solarpunk gets this right. The integration between architecture and nature is visually impressive. The buildings and structures seem to merge naturally with the vegetation, featuring green roofs, light wood, and structures that do not appear to impose on the environment. This visual design reinforces the game's narrative without the need for cutscenes or dialogue. The visuals themselves state that this is a world where technology does not destroy, but lives alongside nature. The demo has a visual polish that surprised me, considering the game was developed by just 2 people. The models are clean, the textures are consistent with the low-poly style, and I did not notice many visual artifacts or optimization issues during gameplay. This shows that the team prioritized aesthetic consistency over trying to produce hyper-realistic graphics that would require more resources and likely lack the same charm. Lighting and particle effects are used sparingly, but effectively. When the sun shines, there is a soft glow that fills the environment. When the wind blows through the turbines, there is subtle movement in the leaves and vegetation. These small visual details add up to create a sense of a living world without overloading the graphics with excessive effects. This understated approach fits perfectly with the game's relaxing tone. Overall, my opinion of Solarpunk's graphics is highly positive. The low-poly style, the vibrant color palette, the visual variety of the islands, and the integration of architecture and nature create a look that is both beautiful and functional. The graphics are not the most advanced on the market, but they have personality, identity, and above all, perfectly serve the game's purpose. For those tired of the same realistic look in survival games, Solarpunk offers a visually refreshing and cozy alternative that genuinely stands out. The performance in the demo surprised me positively from the start. Running on a mid-range PC, the game maintained a stable frame rate at 60 FPS without the typical stutters that usually appear in open-world survival games during the initial hours of play. This is impressive, considering we're talking about a title developed by just 2 people, and it shows that the team prioritized technical optimization right from the beginning of development. What stands out the most is how well the game handles older hardware. I saw some players reporting that they played on computers nearly 5 years old and encountered no performance issues, FPS drops, crashes, or mechanical bugs during the demo. This is rare for open-world indie games, which generally require more modern machines or suffer from poor optimization in their initial releases. Console optimization was planned early on. The game has been officially optimized for Xbox Series and targets running above 60 FPS on that platform, indicating that the development team is thinking about cross-platform performance from the start, rather than leaving it as a secondary concern for after launch. An interesting point is that the game seems to handle high-density object scenarios well. One player reported covering an entire island so densely with trees that there was barely any room left, and even then, the game maintained stable performance without frame drops. This is impressive for a survival game, where the number of objects and vegetation usually impacts FPS directly. The demo also did not present prolonged loading issues or black screens between areas, which is something you might encounter in other survival games. The transition between exploration, building, and opening the inventory is fluid, without abrupt interruptions that would break the game's flow. This shows care for the player's experience beyond simple FPS numbers, focusing on the overall sensation of fluidity. The technical optimization is solid, runs well on old and mid-range hardware, maintains stable frames even with heavy vegetation and objects, and exhibits no critical performance bugs in the demo. For an independent game developed by just 2 people, the level of technical polish is impressive and leaves me confident that the full release will have a solid performance foundation. The game will already be available on Xbox Game Pass on launch day, so if you have a Game Pass subscription, you can test it for free from day one without needing to buy it immediately. The game is primarily recommended for those seeking a relaxing and creative survival experience. If you enjoy Minecraft, Stardew Valley, No Man's Sky, Animal Crossing, or cozy building games, Solarpunk will appeal to you because it eliminates combat, focuses on resource automation, cozy base building on floating islands, and pressure-free exploration. It is perfect for those who want to build a house in the clouds, tend to plants, and experiment with solar and wind energy without the tension of monsters or constant death. It is also excellent for playing with friends. The cooperative mode allows you to play alone or with up to 3 friends, each with their own inventory, enabling you to build together on the same island or create separate spots. This makes the game much more interesting for those who want to play in a group without aggressive competitiveness, maintaining the welcoming atmosphere that defines the project. On the other hand, it is not recommended for players looking for intense combat, extreme challenge, or heavy narrative. The game features no traditional combat, progression is slower and focused on creative building, and the story is told through the environment without explanatory cutscenes. If you are used to survival games like DayZ, Ark, Rust, or Valheim, you will probably find Solarpunk too calm and lacking in challenge. For players with limited or mid-range hardware, the game is a good choice, as the demo runs well on computers nearly 5 years old without FPS drops or crashes. The low poly style and the optimization achieved by just 2 developers show technical care, making the game accessible to those who do not own a latest generation machine. Since the game arrives on Xbox Game Pass on June 8, 2026, I will test it through Microsoft's service first to see if the issues seen in the demo have been resolved. If I like it, I will buy the digital version to support the developers and ensure future updates. The demo has already convinced me enough to invest, but I want to see the final product before spending money. If you are looking for a relaxing, creative, cooperative, and beautiful survival experience, it is highly worth it. If you prefer intense action, extreme challenge, or a traditional narrative, stay away. For me, as someone who enjoys cozy games and is tired of the constant pressure of conventional survival games, Solarpunk is exactly the type of experience I am looking for.